issue of menstruation in the Hindu tradition is a very old and a very complex one. And there's a lot of different threads that weave together. According to tradition, no, it isn't okay. It's okay to pray. God doesn't mind. Talk to God anytime. Pray anytime. Love God anytime. Sing to God anytime. But there's very specific rules, specific niyams, as we say, with regard to temples, religious practices, and our menstruation. And traditionally the rule is no. Now, there's a lot of theories about why that is. The most common, but I think the one that actually isn't real, is this idea that somehow women are dirty at that time. Now, what we know is it isn't dirty. What we know is that it's an extraordinarily divine process. The reason that we menstruate is because the power of the divine creator is within us. So there's nothing dirty or impure or sinful. Certainly nothing more dirty than when you go to the toilet. After you go to the toilet, you wash your hands with soap and water. You would never enter a temple after having gone to the toilet without washing your hands. You would never enter the temple without taking a bath in the morning. So in the same way that we bathe and we cleanse before we go to temple anyway, well, of course you would do that anyway. So in my personal opinion, it's not actually having to do with dirtiness. What I've heard from several very renowned, very enlightened saints is that this was actually the way of the rishis and the sages and the saints giving these women a break. That in traditional culture where women 24 hours a day, 365 days a year are the ones working in the house, working in the fields, never a break. That the rishis and the sages gave a tradition of saying for these 4 days, she's not to be in your bed, she's not to be in your kitchen, she's not to cook your meals, she's just to rest, was actually the way of the rishis and the saints and the sages giving these women a break. But in order to do that, they spoke about, she shouldn't be in your kitchen. She shouldn't be in your bed. She shouldn't be preparing your food. But what I've heard from these saints is that most likely the reason really had to do with just giving these women a break. And especially today, because of course there was a time in history where we didn't have proper menstrual products and where women, as they moved through the world, literally were bleeding. So literally there was dirt and impurity and bacteria flowing out of them. But we know, certainly today, that that's not the case. There's every way to keep ourselves absolutely clean, pure, immaculate. So it's not about that, but it's about that time that was given by the sages and the saints to rest. However, as I said, this is what I have heard from several of the divine and enlightened masters, and it makes sense to me. This isn't a culture I grew up in, so it wasn't something that I learned about this from my parents. It was something I walked into as a 25-year-old and learned about it when I came. And for me, my feeling has always been, just because I don't understand something doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. And so what I would suggest on a personal level, here's how I take care of it. Whether you understand the rule or not, for me, I felt like Indian culture has embraced me. It has absolutely embraced me in the most beautiful way. And so I will respect, follow whatever the rules are, whatever the traditions are, whether I understand them or not. In the same way the culture has embraced me, I will embrace the culture. However, when it comes to just between me and God, so while menstruating, don't go to temple. You don't touch the arti. You don't touch any puja things. But if it's just between you and God, well, God doesn't care. So by all means, pray to God. If it's a temple in your home, you make the rules. If you want to sit there, sit. If it's your home, your temple, do what feels right. But when it's an outside temple, when it's not ours, when it's not about what we want, what we think, whether we agree or we disagree, then just out of basic courtesy, basic respect for others, respect for people's beliefs, worship at home those days. God is everywhere. Sit at the temple in your house. Worship God in the temple in your heart. Worship God in the tree in your backyard. Worship God in the sunset. Worship God anywhere and everywhere. Consider those days, not a day that you can't go to temple, but consider those days the days that the world becomes your temple. The trees, the birds, the air, the grass. Consider those days an opportunity to see God in all of the other places that we normally miss Him.